Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Philip Sherburne, and I am here today with Jim O'Rourke, which I could not be more thrilled about. I was thinking earlier, I would not be the listener that I am today without the influence of Jim O'Rourke. The look you just gave me is priceless. I encountered his work at a time in my life, 1994. I was in my early 20s, very impressionable, kind of moving out of a period in which I had only listened to like hardcore punk and a bunch of other stuff, and all of a sudden, I was searching and discovering, and everywhere I looked, his name was there. It was on the Isolationism compilation. It was on early 90s guitar releases with KK Null and Henry Kaiser. Then there were albums like Disengage, which was an album that I just had no context for. It was a double CD, 2-hour drone piece, essentially, with a title like A Young Person's Guide to Drowning. And I remember buying that and being like, what is this? I had no framework for it, you know, and I still may not, but it kept me progressing, searching further, and I don't want to like reel off a list of greatest hits, but then of course there was Gastr del Sol, which kind of made sense because it was a little bit indie rock, and then all of a sudden they were doing experimental drone music. There was a night in Providence, Rhode Island when I saw Gastr del Sol play with Tony Conrad, and they played, again, an hour-long drone piece. It was violin and guitar.
Yeah, it was something of Tony's, yeah. It was 10 Years Alive on the Infinite Plane.
And again, mind blown. And it was one of the most kind of confrontational listening experiences I remember having, because I remember at the beginning being bored and being like, wait, where's this going? This is, you know, and then it kept going, and at some point I realized I had to make a decision. I had to try and figure out what this piece was trying to tell me. I mean, I could just be stubborn and leave or you know, go to the bar, but I wanted to figure out why this was happening. And something clicked in my head that night, and to me it's just been one of the fundamental listening experiences of my life. So.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just to sort of dive in and go way back. I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of some of your early youthful listening. And there was a story in a recent Tone Glow interview with you that I just can't help but bring up, because you tell a story about listening to a transistor or listening to a cassette player late at night.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like I'm sure it's still the same now. You know, parents will say, you know, go to sleep, stop listening to music. Well, now it'd be stop playing games or something like that. And I had the company was called Sound Design, but it was one word. But I was stupid and I thought it was Sound Signa. And it was a little cassette deck, and it had one speaker, and then the grill for the speaker wasn't cloth, it was just plastic, but it had little holes over the speaker. And so I think the cassette I listened to most was, I had a cassette that I taped from the library of Genesis's Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And I would listen to it with just, you know, because I'd push my whole head on it so that I could listen to it without my parents knowing that I was still listening to music. But what that meant was, when I woke up in the morning and I hid the tape player, I had these red spots all over the right side of my face. And so my mother was somewhat concerned that I had red spots on the side of my face. And I was like, I don't know anything about it. And eventually she took me to the doctor, because the red spots wouldn't go away, because I was listening to Genesis every night. And the doctor also had no idea what the spots were. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. And that went on for a couple years.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I then moved on to, I remember distinctly, I bought 2 cassettes on the same day. within a year after that, which was Talking Heads. It was either 77 or more songs. It was more songs about buildings and food. And Bob Dylan's Street Hassle, who I had not yet listened to Bob Dylan. I knew who he was, but he didn't look that interesting to me. And I think I got about 2 minutes into the Bob Dylan cassette, and that went I don't know where it went because I never saw it again. And then it was like a year of just the Talking Heads cassette causing red spots to appear on my face.
The Talking Heads dots.
Yeah.
So from an early age, I mean, I get the sense that records were really and cassettes, that was your education.
Well, it was records. Cassettes, it was just because they were so cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, they were like 50 cents. And just the record store near my house, that's what I'd buy cassettes when it was something. Well, I didn't really buy cassettes. The cassettes usually, you tape things from the library.
Right.
Yeah, but the Talking Heads cassette was maybe the first cassette I bought, actually. But no, I was totally about records, completely.
And what were you looking for?
I don't know if I was looking for anything. I just thought that was the good stuff in life. Mm-hmm. That and movies. I mean, it wasn't until later in life that I realized food also fits in there. But, because I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, I mean, that was the only two things I cared about, you know. There was nothing else I cared about. I didn't really like reading, had no interest in things people my age did. I just liked listening to records and watching movies. That's what life was about to me.
And where were you discovering, because you, like very early on, you were into some pretty experimental, out there, difficult stuff, things that, you know, your average maybe like 12-year-old isn't going to be turned on to. What was your entry into that world?
Well, I think there's a bit of context to that. I mean, it's definitely the case now that any 12-year-old can get into anything he wants. Yeah. It's easier than ever. But I think what's lost a little bit, I mean, I think you know this is that at that time, you know, a lot of music that people now think is, oh, that must have been underground or that must have been unpopular, was popular music. You go into the record store and there's a poster for the new Frank Zappa record, the new Pat Metheny record, and when he was still not the superstar, you know, the jazz section was large, the classical section was large. I mean, these things were written about in the newspaper. They were in the Toshikan, I forget English, library. You know, I mean, it wasn't really underground culture at all. I mean, I think if you weren't there, for a lot of people looking back, it's like, oh, that must have been, you know, really hard to find. I literally walked 2 blocks from my house to a record store and bought all this stuff. And anything I couldn't get, I'd go to the library. And one of the great things about the library in the States, I don't know if it's still true, but there was this thing called the interlibrary loan. And, you know, I remember distinctly, I've said 100 times, I got that first Mothers of Invention record, the first Frank Zappa record, and it's a gatefold, and you open it up, and it's just a giant list of things he's interested in. So I just went through it. It just made sense to me. And if I like that Jan Garbarek record, who's this guy, you know, Terje Ripdahl? I got to hear something of his. It just made sense to me. I don't know why you wouldn't do that.
Right,
you know?
right. And you found like Stockhausen that way, for instance.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Stockhausen records were easy to get at that time. I mean, he was famous. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of lost to the shifting winds of time. But I mean, he was famous. He was written about in the paper. He was in magazines. He was on TV. It wasn't unusual to see Miles Davis on TV or any of these things. It really wasn't underground music. I mean, you could dig down further, you know, like maybe Stockhausen was, not a household name, but anybody who maybe read a major city newspaper would have heard of him. But, maybe Coggle, you dig a little deeper and you start finding about the other people. But it really wasn't that difficult at all.
What about, say, Derek Bailey? Because this is somebody who, by a quite young age, I mean, you went to meet him. I think you said you met him at a concert in Chicago in the 80s, and then you traveled to London from a trip in Ireland at, I think, 14 years old or something like that.
I was probably 16. I think I remembered wrong in that interview. But that was because there was 2 Derek Bailey records on ECM.
Okay.
And in the early days of ECM, and ECM is now, of course, a major, well-known jazz label. But even in the 80s, it was, Keith Jarrett was very, very famous at that point because he had a hit record with the Colin Concert. So, I was mentioning it before, the library thing. There used to be this system, maybe there still is, where if your local library didn't have something, they would look to see if another library in the system from anywhere in the States had it, and then they would ship it to that library for you to take it out. But in my case, my library had one of the 2 ECM records by Derek, and I didn't know who he was. It was the record with Derek and Dave Holland, but playing cello. And I'd never heard anything like that in my life. I mean, I think it was the strangest thing I had heard at that point in my life. It just sounded like somebody had broken some Webern records and glued them back together. But it was really intriguing. So I ordered the other one, which was the Music Improvisation Company, which has like Hugh Davies on electronics and Evan Parker and Jamie Muir on percussion, and that just blew my mind. So I had to find out about that stuff. After hearing that record, I had to find out. And by chance, about 2 years later, Derek, as he did, he played fairly, like maybe every few years, because he was based in New York for a good period of the 80s. So he would play in the States quite a bit at that time. And I went to go see him with, I believe, no, it wasn't Mint. With Min Tanaka was the second time. But I went to go see him, and I just went up to him, and because they had records for sale, and they had Incus records, which I didn't know about because I hadn't scratched that deep down yet, and so I was just a dumb kid, and I just, I remember distinctly right around the same time there was a record store in Chicago called the Jazz Record Mart, which was really, for many, many decades, was the most important jazz record store in Chicago. And they had everything, but the owners of the store and the sort of general tenor of the store was anything after 1955 is bogus, Okay. And at that point, I was really into Cecil Taylor. I loved Cecil Taylor. And Cecil Taylor had done a duo record with Max Roach. And Max Roach was doing a solo. It was literally just a snare drum and a hi-hat solo set at the Jazz Record Mart, and he did it, and it was amazing. And afterwards, there was like a little question and answer thing, and everyone was talking about when you and Bird, and it was like 10,000 questions about Bird, and and it's all older guys, and in very typical Chicago way, all of them had beards to about here. What do you call these things? Suspenders, and a belly about to out here. And I said, Mr. Roach, when you played with Cecil Taylor, and everyone around me just starts, shut up, pushing me around. But Mr. Roach actually answered the question. But it was that kind of, where was I going with that?
Derek Bailey.
Oh, yeah. And so, the shows were happening. And in the 80s, there still was, before the Reagan, first Bush administration slashed the arts funding. Not that, that's arts funding is a whole other talk. But there used to be this thing called New Music America, which was this festival that happened every year in a different city in America. And, Glenn Branca, like in the Chicago one in 1982, Glenn Branca played, and John Cage, everything. Robert Ashley had a... So, basically what I'm saying, and then it's basically until 88 or 89, all that culture was still kind of on the surface and easy to get to.
Okay.
It's basically around 89 or 90 that it just died in America.
Okay.
And so it's understandable. I mean, the music still existed, but the distribution networks, the support for it, just disappeared after that.
You were playing guitar at the time, or you had taken guitar lessons at the very least. Right.
Yeah. I wanted to be Alan Holdsworth, but I couldn't do it.
You begin improvising around then?
Yeah, my mother called it me avoiding practicing because I remember she always insisted on giving me cologne. I don't know why. I had no desire to wear this stuff, and I never did. But I remember distinctly she gave me a bottle of cologne that the bottom was glass, which had the cologne, and it was like a clear blue pair of legs, and then the top half was this rubber football player throwing a ball. So I think she was like trying to get all her wishes and desires for me into one object.
A little more sports, a little better smell, a little more hygiene.
But but the top half was like this rubber. And I could scrape the guy's football on the guitar, and it was fantastic. It just sounded great. So that's how I got into that. Was avoiding the cologne. Yeah.
Eau de pigskin.
Yeah.
So you're a teenager. You're improvising. I guess around Chicago and beginning to travel to Europe, or maybe that was a little later. You're making tape music. At what time were you starting to make tape music?
I mean, kind of simultaneously. I had a tape deck. Well, first it was like having two mono, the old-fashioned way. When I was a little bit younger, I had two of those kind of slimline cassettes, I think they called them, like just basically one speak. One was the sound design thing that put the holes in my head, and then another one. It was you play the tape out in the air and bounce that way. But then I got this TAC machine where you could record. It was only 2 tracks, but you could record one, and then you could record on the left and then bounce to the right. And then I just started making cassettes because you'd see even like in the punk magazines and the stapled zines, you could find out, and also because of some of the stores in Chicago, like especially Wax Trax.
Okay,
that's a very important part of if you want to get into the whole thing about Chicago. These stores had cassettes because the sort of cassette underground was starting in Europe, a little bit in America, but especially in Europe, and you could get like underground cassettes by noise bands and stuff like that for fairly cheap. And I realized, you can just make these. And so I would make these cassettes and go to Wax Trax and
sell them.
I'd give them to them. They say, it's on consignment, but basically it gives you $10 credit.
Wow.
And I'd buy the cassettes by P16D4 or something. It was kind of a great time that I think because it hasn't really been that well documented. I'm talking about like 80 to 89. There was so much happening. And in Europe as well, it just hasn't been documented that well.
So like at Wax Trax, is that sort of where you were soaking up industrial culture? And I mean, because you play with illusion of safety, for instance.
Yeah. Well, when you say industrial, sort of the original
noise.
Media. A little bit. Because Wax Trax was right around the corner from my college.
Okay.
Eventually where I went to college. But it was a really well-known store for that kind of thing. And I might have first actually found out about Illusion of Safety by getting one of their cassettes there. And also they played in town, so once I got old enough to at least sneak into shows.
Right.
Not really old enough to get in, but old enough to sneak in. There was a noise underground music in Chicago. I mean, Illusionist Safety was probably the name that still lasts all these years later. But
And you were playing with him again.
yeah,
very early on,
I think I was playing on the same bill with them or something, and I was playing, like guitar on a table, and he just asked me to play, jam with him,
Yeah.
and it just went from there. I was looking for anything at that point,
And looking for anything and also doing everything, right? I mean, because you had maybe I'm compressing a few years here, but you had Breeze Glass going. You had your fingers in a lot of different pots in that era. It seems like you were doing, tape music. You were doing free improv. You were doing kind of noise stuff, this sort of indie rock adjacent type of stuff.
Well, that came a little later, and that was more initially because, I'm skipping a few years here, but eventually I decided I had learned how to engineer well enough to do basic stuff, but I decided that I needed to learn how to engineer things like other people playing as opposed to things I wanted to make, so that I could find a way to make a living. Isn't correct, because I still lived with I decided I was either going to still live with my parents and do exactly what I want to do, or I was going to move out and get a job. And I decided to endure living with my parents for a couple more years. But I decided I had to learn how to engineer so that I can do work that I can learn something from, for what I want to do. And also, hopefully the opposites, whatever I'm doing, can hopefully bleed over into that. But that I could pay the bills on something that had nothing to do with what I wanted to do, but wasn't like going to destroy my soul. You know?
Yeah. Was that important to you to have that division between?
Yeah, it did.
Not everything riding on your own.
Yeah, and it had a lot to do with, because I started playing at that time, like I was saying, things kind of died off in America. Around 88 or 9, I was only playing in Europe, either on improvised festivals or whatever. Because, that culture really only existed in Europe at that time. Or by the good graces of a couple of friends, like living on the couch in their back room for 2 weeks, and using their studio and living like that for 5 years, kind of like a bum, really. That once I kind of started drifting back to America, because I was able to start getting paying work as an engineer. But then, because of what was happening in Chicago then, outside, I was the person people would ask, look to after Steve Albini, if Steve was busy or if they were a little too weird. And Steve was super cheap. He was always, I mean that in the best sense of the word. He was the fairest guy there was, but I was super cheap. I believe my first few records I recorded, it was like lunch.
Wow.
But I started to get work like that. And it was also good because it exposed me to music and musicians who I might have been suspicious of.
Okay.
But I learned.
Well, how come, like stylistically or just
because it had to do with culture, and it had to do with going out to shows and people hanging out and scenes and things like that. I had no interest in that, but because I had no interest in that, I didn't get to meet the individuals in that world, and a bulk of those people that I thought were probably boring people were boring people. But for me. But there was a handful of really interesting people, and I enjoyed working with them, and I learned a lot from them, and learned a lot about looking at things in different ways.
What are some projects from that period?
U.S. Maple is the one I'm as you could probably.
Can you explain? Because I don't know if everybody here
U.S.
is going to know
Maple is
U.S.
probably
Maple.
not very well known, which is really a shame. they were, look them up later. U.S. Maple. I truly believe they were the greatest band ever to come out of America.
I saw them once at Fort Thunder in Providence, and
it must have blown your mind.
It was incredible. And I remember this. I don't know his
Al.
name. He was wearing red leather gloves, and it was just that image, you know. But yeah.
But basically, the first time you hear them, you're going to think it's a mess. But there's not a single note, or even just with the vocalist, even like a bit of phlegm in his throat between two syllables. Everything was written out.
Wow.
Everything was decided. But it never sounded that way. But they could repeat it on the dime. But anyway, that's the one to this day I'm still, I'm so glad I got to do those two records.
And you mixed those then?
Yeah, I recorded, the first one was the first rock band I ever recorded. It was the first U.S. Maple record. I had never done like a guitar, in their case it's guitar, bass, and singer. Guitar, drums, and singer. But, I mean, mostly it was people like Smog or people like that who were looking to me. I didn't do too many rock bands, but that was the beginning of the rise of whatever you want to call it, the new singer-songwriters or whatever. And I think it's because I came from a background where I could write arrangements and I knew how to, like, if they wanted a string quartet, I could actually write it.
Was that because of your college education? Had you learned that in school?
Yeah, I mean, in spite of my college education, maybe.
Okay.
But, yeah, so, like, in Chicago, it was sort of like, oh, Jim's a decent engineer, but he can do horn arrangements too, and you only have to buy him lunch, you know. So, it sort of started. It's sort of the things started to overlap that way, and I started doing my own stuff completely privately, you know, and kind of stopped doing shows. Only didn't do that much anymore, and because I was able to do both at the same time. I had time to do my own stuff at home, and then I really did enjoy recording various types of bands. I mean, I never did anyone I didn't like. Once.
Okay.
Once. But I found out while I was doing it I didn't like them.
Okay.
But yeah, they kind of overlapped. And it's partially because what was happening then in Chicago, people were starting, most of the image of I don't know if that history is still a big, it used to be a big deal, the Chicago 90s boom or whatever. But it was all people moving into Chicago. Very few people from that world were actually from Chicago. So it was just this thing that was all of a sudden there, and some of the people sought me out to help them make their records.
Gastr del Sol starts out in somewhere in here, no? I mean,
it's around 93 or 94.
So I think previously you weren't part of it, right?
No, it was originally Bastro. And what happened is they all moved to Chicago. I believe John moved to work as a recording engineer. David came to go to college, and they had turned into like an acoustic trio, and then John and Bundy left to start Tortoise.
Okay.
It just, I forget what it was, but David knew about me because of that. He knew I'd played with Derek Bailey and AMM and things like that, and he was starting to get interested in that music. And he heard from people like, oh, if you Jim's the guy who has those records, so he just kind of got in touch with me that way, and it just so happened that there was a moment where all four of us played together. It was very briefly.
And then Gastr del Sol. I mean, it's that was a huge sort of formative thing for me, and to me it's such a fascinating discography because it's quite small, but you guys evolved so quickly. I mean, it began from this sort of songful indie adjacent thing, and then very quickly you've got pipe organs and kind of tape collage, and it became something much more expansive.
Well, I mean, the way I remember it was like that from the beginning, but that's me. I mean, I think it's because David and I were going in opposite directions from our backgrounds, and when we were working together was that moment where it made sense, because he was coming originally from being in a punk band, Squirrel Bait, and from that background, and that's sort of a previous indie rock generation, like Homestead Records and all that stuff. Early 90s American, which, like, I don't know I'll let other people decide the words. So he was coming from that, but was getting interested in improvised music and not so much contemporary classical music, but a bit, but mostly improvised music and things like that. And on a little bit more of an academic level, because he was going to University of Chicago, which is like hardcore. You can look it up. So we were just, and I was sort of sick of that world actually at that point, because for various reasons I kind of getting sick of how it was either completely excluding all other musics, or using the other musics in a sort of gimmicky way. I mean, I don't want to. I'll use names, but I'm not using them as a criticism. But you know, you had certain improvisers where it's like, no, we're doing this, and why are you playing like that? And then on the other hand, you had people who were like, no, we should be bringing it all in. You know, like John Zorn, especially Eugene Chadbourne, but in a way that I didn't like. Personally, because to me that was wedding band music. It's like it became like, look, I can play, you know, I sound like the Ventures now, and now I sound like something. It's their aesthetic. It's fine, but it didn't. For me, I didn't like it. It's like, no, the challenge is how to find a way to incorporate it in a way in which it changes but still retains the cultural baggage, but has now been transformed into something else. I don't want to refer to it. I want it to somehow transform but keep its character, but give a new perspective on what's happening. I didn't like this referential quality to it. So because of that, I was kind of getting sick of that stuff, frankly, and I was more and more, I was like, I just want to make these things in a studio. I don't want to go, you know, to the bookstore down the street, play for an hour. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it won't. You get a cup of coffee and you come home and, you know, watch a movie. I was much more interested in sitting in a studio by that point. I would have been happy just sitting in a studio all day.
You were also, it sounds like you were also getting more interested as well, though, in songs, right? Like you said that you and David kind of had this opposite energies, and I'm just thinking about how your, maybe songs is reductive, but also then your rock records come in here too.
The context of those is really, I mean, because they mean something very different to me than that I know what, I'm grateful that they mean anything at all to other people. But in context of that time, what I saw happening was the beginning of this, what I thought was really a kind of, what's the word for it? Not distasteful. There was a growing sense of earnesty in that music that I found repulsive. And there were... Pop music generally didn't interest me even as a kid. There was, if I liked someone, I really liked them, and I never understood the idea. Like I would have friends that liked pop music, and I was like, what does that? I mean, it's like, do you like this band? Yeah. It's like, do you like this band? Yeah, they're all right. Well, why do you listen to this band? They're all right. Like, why don't you just listen to the really good stuff? Because like I really loved 10cc. Like my first show was Wings in 1975. That was the first show I saw. And I know Wings was not that great, but give me a break, I was 6. But I loved 10cc. And there was a couple of, I mean, of course I loved Van Dyke Parks. And I especially loved David Ackles. and to a degree, there was a certain kind of American cynical songwriting. I didn't understand that's what it was as a kid. They made me laugh, because they were so, not nasty, but
barbed.
Barbed and the exact opposite of earnest.
Okay. Yeah.
And at that time, around 95 or 96, and also there was this, there was this kind of gross earnesty coming in that would eventually turn into things like, what do they call that? It's a couple years later, but like the most earnest then turned
emo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. But this was before that. But I just saw it starting to happen. And also like the introduction of like not Tropicalia, although there was a little bit of that. It was like retro cool cocktail music. All these things started to happen in that world of music, which I wasn't really involved with, but I saw it.
Right.
And it really, when I made Eureka, it was sort of from the viewpoint. I wanted this. Okay, let's keep that in mind. That's A. We'll refer back to A later. So the thing, and I mentioned it before, for me, the most fascinating and interesting and most challenging part of doing anything is when you use genre conventions as a means to an end. And I was more influenced by film that way. There were certain kind of filmmakers who would make, this is the key thing, they would make genre films. It's not that I'm interested in genre, it's just that genre by its very definition means this thing has baggage, it has a history, it has certain codes that you're supposed to look for that mean things in general. But like, I loved William Friedkin. I loved, I just forgot his name. His dad created Betty Boop. Fleischer, Richard Fleischer, his son, the great director Richard Fleischer. And they made genre films. While you're watching them, they work exactly as they're supposed to do, and there's simultaneously this whole other layer that is not necessarily critiquing it, but creating a sort of detachment and a friction and a resonance between the two layers. And I didn't, maybe around that time, like a good example is Godard's Weekend is a film like that doesn't even bother to try to keep the genre part of it. It just throws it away and kind of like laughs on it and spits on it. And that's fine. That was a very influential movie to me as a kid as well. But the most interesting thing for me is how do you make something that is not what it is, but it doesn't say to the audience, it doesn't wink at the audience, it doesn't say, oh, I'm just kidding, or like we're being what's the word for it, ironic here, or it is being both simultaneously. There's no reason, it's not degrading to the art form that it's making. I mean, a film like, I remember how amazed I was by To Live and Die. God, am I wearing that? I am. I'm wearing my To Live and Die in LA t-shirt right now.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Not kidding. Thank you.
Great Wang Chung soundtrack as well.
Yes, very good. Best film trailer ever, by the way. But that film, because I saw that one when that came out kind of, no, that came out a couple years earlier, but I saw that when it came. That, to me, was the peak of artistry. At that time, I've seen things better, better art since then. But like that amazed me. I couldn't believe how it was so bitter and so critical, yet simultaneously being everything it says it's not being. And to me, that's the most interesting part of the work is doing that and then hiding the work. That's the most important thing. Hiding the work, like all the work that went into getting these particular points, these beats and these rhythms to happen, but don't bring attention to that. It's the best example I can use of that is my old friend Glenn Kochi, the drummer who would eventually become the drummer in Wilco. And I don't know if it's still the case, but it used to be the case that I could give Glenn some sheet music, some drum part, and it'd be complicated, and he'd just go, da, 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 and then he'd play it. And I go, okay, second measure, what you're doing on the hi-hat, bring that forward a beat for 2 measures, then add this at the end, and I would just do this, because, I liked, I knew what I wanted, but that was the fastest way instead of rewriting the music, and he'd go, da, ba, 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 ba. Okay. Now here's the key thing. You hear stories about people like that all the time. Like the drummers who played with Frank Zappa, and it's like it's amazing. But then what you hear is sports. It's just like look at me. But Glenn could do it. You hear the ideas if you listen for them. You hear the weird things that happen because of the ideas, but you don't hear the work. And that's key to me. It probably has something to do with my upbringing. Like really strict Irish Catholic, that modesty,
right,
and probably being scared all the time has something to do with it. But that's a key element. Okay, going back to A, or going back to Eureka again. It was those 2 things. I was already well into this way of thinking, like I just talked about. But this thing that was kind of annoying me, this new earnesty, I wanted to see if I could do something with that.
So you wanted to invoke these very American genres, but in a way that's not just pastiching them or cut and pasting them.
It was the first thing of that. Well, actually, Bad Timing was the first thing of that thing I did. But this was the first time I dealt with words. And to me, it's got problems all over it. It was the first time I was trying. It was like the third time actually, because I think there's 2 versions of it that I threw away. But it was my first attempt to take exactly my. It sounds horrible, like my aesthetic interests into areas that I knew about, but that I didn't know about doing, So for me, that record is a bit, because I think it's a bit of a failure, but it's not. Someone just said this to me like 2 weeks ago. They said it's not a failure because no one believes what you're saying. I know there's people who do hear that record, they're like, I totally hear what you're saying. But most people who like that record, I've met so many people who like that, because then there's the EP afterwards, like, oh, we played this song at our wedding as our wedding song. Like, did you by chance read the lyrics? Like, oh yes, they're beautiful. It's like, have a good marriage.
Good luck with that.
There's nothing I can do.
Was your interest in John Fahey, was that in part, like, did he do something with genre in a way that's kind of akin to the way you're talking about it?
He did. I have to be honest, I was a fan, but I wasn't a monster fan. Because, and it sounds silly, because his records were really, really easy to get. Right. When I was young, and you know how it is, like, oh yeah, I'll get that the next time. So I never went crazy on him, but there were a handful of his records that I did like quite a bit. Like I liked America, and I liked, I didn't like the really sort of like sit down and play guitar ones as much. I probably would have liked them better when I was younger, if I heard them when I was younger and I still thought, I'm going to play guitar.
Right, you still liked musicians.
Yeah. But he wasn't like on my Mount, what is the Mount Olympus? Is that what it is?
No. Rushmore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But of course, of that generation of guitar pickers and stuff like that, he was easily my favorite.
Yeah.
Because he did stuff with the studio. Leo Kottke and some other people were like, actually, technically way better. But it's that weird thing with technical. With me, it's like you've got to get to like Alan Holdsworth for me to be interested again, because like that's not humanly possible. So it becomes interesting again.
It's been 10 years since your last rock record, right? The simple.
Yes.
Do you have any interest in going back to that terrain?
No.
No.
I mean, that one's sort of specifically made to end that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
wow.
it's sort of. I mean, yeah. I kind of specifically made to end that thing. Even down, there's it's only on the LP version, but there's specific things about the types of gloss that are used on parts of the cover have sort of a. The front, up until then, it was always the front cover was always the back cover on all those records. There's their theme. It's the both. On that record, it's the front cover, which some people think it's me, but of course you don't know because it's not facing.
Back, yeah.
But the back cover is printed with a special gloss, and because I think it's just the smoke just remains, so. It isn't the same, but it's printed with a certain gloss. So if you hold it in front of yourself, you see your own face in the middle of the smoke. It's related to a dumb thing I used to say about, especially the internet early on. It's like the only time the internet becomes a mirror is when you shut off your computer. Because you see your face. So it's various things. But yeah, even down to that, it was like very specifically made.
It's finale.
Yeah. It's not finale. It's like these records all have something to do with each other. Because that last record is it is specifically about the previous three records, and it sort of answers certain things about the previous records. Some of them are literally part two of songs on previous records.
I wanted to ask, I have so many things I want to ask you, and so I'm going to be jumping around a little bit, but I wanted to ask you about Roland Kayn, because I know this is
someone else.
that is very important, that means a lot to you,
yes.
And you have been intensely involved in this audio restoration project. Tell us a little bit about who that is and what your involvement is.
Well, Roland Kayn was a composer, same generation as maybe just a hair younger than Stockhausen and Nono and Kogel. That generation, I mean, a lot of people would say the Darmstadt generation. But he didn't have that much success as a composer of scored music. And like a lot of composers, he got a teaching position at the Institute of Sonology in, I don't know if it was in The Hague then or in Amsterdam, but it was in Holland. And he was also involved in, at the same time, with Il Gruppo Nuova. Is it Il Gruppo Nuova?
Il Gruppo Nuovo. But anyway,
something or other, which had Ennio Morricone, and it was a mostly Italian improvising music group. And so at Sonology, they had, at that time, each country sort of had their electronic music studio. Like in Germany, it was fairly funded by the German government, and it was in Cologne. And in Holland, it was at Sonology. And he was simultaneously getting interested in this kind of, not school of thought, what do you call it? Scientific movement called cybernetics, which is a whole, there's books about it, we can't get into that. But basically, he started getting interested in making purely electronic music that he didn't necessarily compose. He was more interested in creating systems that were self-regulating, that changed themselves, and he was more interested in almost like building an organism. And there's simultaneously this other scientific movement that is now kind of forgotten, called artificial life.
Okay.
Which is very different than artificial intelligence. Artificial life is a part. I mean, cybernetics and artificial life are related science movements, An artificial life, basically, to reduce it to its simplest thing, is you can create extremely complex structures with only one or two things because of the power of exponential power. Once you get this and you start going exponentially, you get enormous before you know it, and then you actually have systems built out of like almost nothing. So these were two of his interests, and luckily there was the engineer at the university at Synology named Jop Vink, and so the two of them started. And it was very common in that day. The composer didn't necessarily touch the equipment. There was an engineer. That whole generation's Stockhouse and Barrio, and they rarely touched the equipment. They had an engineer do things for them, and he started making these pieces that were basically, probably most likely, giant sessions of recording just raw material from what this system they set up was doing, and then creating a composition out of it.
Cutting the tape later, okay.
But eventually, more and more, I would go on for hours about him. But he had a few, there was one side of a Deutsche Grammophon record, actually with Luigi Nono, during the sort of great run of Deutsche Grammophon. And I happened to be in Aachen, Germany, in the late 80s, staying at a friend's place, and he played me Roland Kayn, and I couldn't believe there was these 5 box sets, like 4 LP and 5 LP box sets
that existed back then.
Back then on a label that mostly put out Mozart. I don't know what the deal was, and I was like, "This is the greatest music I've ever heard. Where can I get this?" And he's like, "Let's go to the grocery store." And we went to his local grocery store, which was called Saturn. And it was a German grocery store chain. But it had sections like, music, records, household items. And sitting there were four of the 5 box sets. Wow. And I just took them. And it took me years to get the 5th one, but I became a fanatic since that day.
And so Ian Fenton from Frozen Reeds has initiated this project, right?
Yeah, when he finished working at the university, he retired and he took some of the equipment home with him. Basically, not the machines, but he had like a huge archive of tape. And he took those home, and he had 2 tape machines, a couple effects, a mixer, and a DAT machine. And he proceeded to make like 1 hour, 2 hour pieces every day for the rest of his life. He made like something like 500 pieces at home.
Wow.
Pretty much every day. And some of those came out on like the sort of private, family run CD label. This would be like in the late 90s. But those were super expensive and hard to get, and frankly, not very well done. And so there had been nothing for years and years. And Ian, by that time, Mr. Kayn had passed away, and I know I'm always saying this. I believe it's Kayn, but I've been saying Kayn for like 40 years. What can I do? And so Ian got in touch with his daughter, who wanted to publish in a CD box set a piece, which I think it was like 18 hours long. And so he asked me to fix the tapes up, because they had all his stuff he had recorded at home had been recorded to DAT tape. And it might be something a lot of people don't know, but DAT tape was this like supposed miracle recording medium that came out in the 90s that ended up being a complete nightmare. And so lots of things recorded in the 90s are lost to time because it was a bad format. So all his stuff was recorded to DAT. So in particular, that piece needed I think I spent like 6 months not like 6 months every day, but pretty much.
And were you going through and visual? I read somewhere you discussed going through and visually
you had to literally
waveform.
redraw the waveforms and stuff because
to make it to remove glitches or
glitches. And the thing that's not to get too technical, but the thing that's a pain in the butt with his stuff is that with glitches and stuff, there is software that does work well to get rid of that stuff. But the thing with his stuff is the phase relationship between the left and the right side, because that's kind of the key to how his stuff works, that has to be kept. And that software isn't looking for that. So you kind of have to go in and do it by hand.
Wow.
But that was the worst one, luckily. That was the worst after that. So basically after that, Mr. Kayn's daughter saw that I was willing to do this. I wanted to do this. And she could see that I was sincere about wanting to keep his stuff alive and keep it safe. So the three of us talked, and eventually it's there's so much stuff so I just said we should just do this on Bandcamp.
Okay.
Because, anything super special, we'll do a CD box set or something, but there's hundreds of pieces to get through here. And the only way to at least organize ourselves to get this done, systematically, is to do it that way. And so we started doing. So she picks the pieces every month, and she sends it to me, and I clean it up and fix what needs to be fixed, and then she puts it up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you see parallels between himself, or his work, and the Steamroom project? Just thinking about that daily practice of recording, right? And
probably. I mean, I started the Steamroom before the Roland Kayn thing happened. I didn't have any friends who were on Bandcamp when I started using it, and I convinced my friend Kevin Drum. I was like, you got to do this. Wow. You got to do this. You'll get, because you need money. Yeah. So, and he's someone who really doesn't care about it. Whatever. So it's really easy for him. But yeah, the thing I liked about Bandcamp at that time, and I think it's still true despite all the troubles recently, is that it's a thing that on the internet that has some modicum, is that the word? Mm-hmm. Of decency, And I like the idea of making something, putting it up. I know there's only 50 or 60 people who actually want to listen to that stuff. I don't want to take this stuff and say I don't want it to enter into that whole rigmarole. And I also like the idea that when I fall off the top of a building or something and finally croak, that someone can just wipe the whole page and they're gone. I love that.
your executor,
that's
their first.
Gone.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, it isn't as. I'm still fairly picky about what I put up there.
Are you recording long form pieces on a fairly daily basis?
Not anymore, but it's more and more that I'm recording the stuff that I'm working on, that I'm studying, and they're recorded as examples of I'm gonna I'm gonna do another Hilbert pass here or whatever, blah blah blah. Even in the past, I rarely recorded sessions or anything. Those are always made. The things are always made afterwards from recordings.
Okay. Yeah. You're recording.
The recordings are made so I can listen to what's happening. Okay, I'm going to change the math here. I'm going to change this, and I want to hear what happens. And I generally keep those because they're reference. And sometimes they give me an idea.
For a fuller composition.
For a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, a thing.
I like to call them things.
All right.
And I haven't been doing them as much lately because I've been busy mostly actually engineering the last few years. But yeah, I just like the idea that they're up there only for the people who actually want to hear them, and there's absolutely no idea of please listen to this thing you have no interest in.
There's no context even. You just put them up there, and it's.
I was talking to Fennesz. This is a few years ago. I was talking to Fennesz about it because he doesn't do it that much, and he's like, I'll tell you what. He's like, you shouldn't spend any time on these things. And I'm like, why? He's like, you just put up the word, just put up the thing you don't even care about, and it'll be a thing everyone loves the most. And I was like, no, no. And so I decided to. It was when there was cicadas. There's cicadas like half the year out by us, and I put one speaker out the window, and I put a mic, and then I just played something on something I made. And the cicadas responded to it, and was like, okay, whatever. And it was, I think it's 40, and I put it up, and that thing has sold like 10 times more. It literally,
I literally reviewed that one, perhaps.
I didn't even listen to it once it was done. I just put it up, and to this day, it's.
Well, the work, has a life of its own.
Yeah.
Or the thing, anyway.
I set it free.
Exactly.
But Christian was right.
I wanted, we're so close to being out of time, but I did want to ask you before we're done here about Włodzimierz Kotoński, who's this Polish electronic musician from, I think, 59. Yeah. It's a piece. So what is it and what are you doing with it?
Well, I first heard his work. There was a box set on Philips. Maybe some of you have seen that kind of classic, the Philips with the silver covers, and it was sort of an omnibus of the various electronic music studios of it had like the Cologne, like one side is Germany, one side is Holland, and one side is Tokyo for the NHK. And then there was one side and I've just forgotten the name of the studio, but it was the Polish National Electronic Music Studio. And that was the first time I heard his work. And this is like late 50s, early 60s electronic music. So it has that sort of like what a lot of people will say, like old science fiction movie bleep bloop quality, because the only things they had to make sounds were literally like a test oscillator, and there were no synths yet or anything like that. So there is a limited palette to what they have to use to make for sounds and for rearranging and deconstructing. Deconstructing the sounds anyway. But I remember being struck by two pieces on that. No, three pieces, but it doesn't matter. But one was Kotoński's piece because he was doing something. I could tell that the studio was probably the one that had the least amount of equipment, because all the pieces they were
more elaborate.
They were all mono. There was no stereo. It was like, but despite the what's the word for it? Obstacles. Kotoński's work had a very, it stuck out to me, and he was doing very interesting structurally. He was doing things that sort of almost implied nonlinear time, which is a hard thing to do in music. And his music wasn't that easy to get, but over time I heard more of his notated music and his electronic music. And I've always been struck by his music, and I remember there's one piece of his in particular called Alia, if that's the right pronunciation, that for years ago I found a copy of the CD. It's a compilation of music recorded at EMS, which is a studio it's Sweden's official electronic music studio. And he went there. It was very common, that the composers would go, I'm going to make a piece at the one in Rome, I'm going to make a piece here. And so he made this piece in Stockholm, and I loved it. And maybe about 15, maybe Eiko can fix my memory. And I found another copy of this CD box, and I gave it to Eiko, and then Eiko became obsessed with Kotoński as well after hearing that piece. So when the Unsound folks asked us, this was going back to Osaka. Because that was a kind of combination, because it was connected to the Poland, what do you say? Pavilion? Yeah,
okay,
at the Expo.
Yeah, in the Expo.
So he said, if you have any ideas of something that actually has something to do with the history of Polish electronic music. And so at first I was thinking, I'd like to introduce, because especially in Japan, most people haven't heard his music. But then I thought it would probably be more interesting to do something that introduced his music as well as gave some sort of live, as opposed to like, you know, old-fashioned, you know, listen to the music from these speakers, please.
Yeah.
So we decided to do that, and then tonight we're doing it. And it won't be the same as when we did it in Osaka. I mean, it will be similar because we're using the same pieces by him, but it'll be different. It's different every time.
Cool. Yeah. I'm excited. We are almost out of time, but is it okay to open up to a couple of questions here?
Sure,
I didn't ask you
as long as there are
beforehand.
no guns.
No guns, only questions, no comments. I'm assuming there's a microphone out in the crowd somewhere. Yeah, so just a very few. Are there any questions? Well, if there's no questions.
Right here. I'm Raphael. You translated an interview with Eiko for me once, so thank you. Yeah.
My pleasure.
I didn't really have a question, but I felt like no one was going to ask one. So, but like, yeah. I don't know. What records are you into right now?
What am I listening to right now?
Yeah, what are you listening to right now?
I don't listen to very much now because honestly, I don't have time. But there's always a pile of Merzbow records that I've bought that I haven't heard yet, which going back maybe 2 years, which means about 250 records. So there's that. I can't say I've heard anything new recently that knocked me out because I haven't listened to anything new. But I'll just mention some things I think are awesome that I listen to occasionally. Help me. Kyle Gann, who is more known as a music critic. It's been a couple years by now. He made a 3 CD set of pieces for 3 disclaviers, which are pianos that can be played from the computer with this particular tuning system that he's made called hyperchromaticism. Is that right? Yeah. That's amazing. I love Georg Friedrich Haas. I listen to him all the time. Gosh, I really don't. I mean, I have to listen to Roland Kayn all the time, you know?
Yeah, that's a lot of hours, right?
Yeah.
Do you have...
Movies. Movies. My favorite recently, Bertrand Bonello's The Beast. Pacifiction by Sarah. Yeah, those were really good.
Where do you have a starting point recommendation for Roland Kayn or Kayn?
Infra or Tektra.
Okay.
Those are... Tektra was the first one I heard, and that really changed my life. But Infra is probably the greatest thing he ever did.
All right.
Yeah, those are great.
Thank you, Jim.
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
We're done.
I think we're done. Thank you so much, Jim. That was amazing.
Thank you.